This is the ultimate round in several rooms of panels, and we're in a tight schedule here. So thank you very much for coming. My name is Christoph Thun-Hohenstein. We have a wonderful panel here. You can see the names up there. I'm just saying a few words because we have wonderful presentations prepared. This is a steep topic. Imagine Digital Humanism in 2100. On the other hand, it's not that far-fetched. I usually say it in my lectures, but I was very satisfied or happy when I was at the Schwarzenegger Climate Summit, the Austrian World Summit last week. And Kamala Harris was there as a guest of honor. And she said she loves Generation Z. They are so beautifully impatient. And then she said we have to work, we have to find solutions that work for the next 80 years because they have the best chances to live in robust health in the year 2100. And this confirms what I usually say. We really have to work on these solutions. So here we have a wonderful round of, probably come here, a wonderful round of panelists, which I introduced very briefly. You can find more online in the program. Oliver Carter, some of them I've worked with extensively in the past. Some our paths crossed many times when I was a museum director already. So Oliver Carter is a fantastic graphic designer, communication designer, artist, but also professor at the University of Applied Arts. Thank you very much, Oliver, for being part of this.
Thank you for having me.
With Eva Fischer, I really have worked extensively, founder of Soundframe, visual arts, audiovisual arts. You're also curating exhibitions on AI and other topics. And for the last couple of years, you also have been founder and director of Cyber, which is a contemporary immersive virtual arts festival taking place at Belvedere 21. Every year, the next one open in October.
November.
November this time. Okay, good, great. So please come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Joanna Niesenboim, I've met yesterday for the first time. We have been introduced by Peter Knees. Thank you, Peter, also for doing that online. And I thought she has a professor title that really takes up a lot of issues or concepts that I have also been articulating for a long time. She's professor for modern human world and regenerative AI, and that's very important. So thank you very much also for being part of this. Matias del Campo, our path also crossed many times already before you went to the US. Then you lived a long time in the US together with your partner of Span Architects. Now you're back, which is fantastic because he's one of the world's, I would say, most interesting authorities at the interface of architecture, cultural production, and artificial intelligence. Thank you, Matias.
It's very good.
And Anap, she's also professor here at the University of Applied Arts for design investigations. But today we ask her to do an artistic lecture in her capacity as designer, co-founder together with her partner of Superflux, which is based in London, filmmaker and many other roles, futurist, I like the term. And we have also worked together in the past extensively, also co-curated an exhibition, a big exhibition on climate care, and so on and so forth. I have to say one thing. This is not only about AI, it's not only about the digital world, because I'm expected to bring in two things. One is ecology. So you will also hear a lot about ecology. 2100 without ecology, a climate you cannot think of. And the other one is also, of course, bring in the arts. But the only one doing that, but that was also the idea that I chair a panel here, bringing in artists from different disciplines working in this world. So Anap will do a lecture, an artistic lecture, We then have presentations by the other panelists here, and then we have a second very brief round before opening up for your questions. We won't have a lot of time for questions because we are on a very tight schedule. We have started late here. Thank you very much. Anat, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Hi, everybody. I know you've been listening to a lot of very interesting scholarship and projects. I've taken the subtitle of this panel seriously about what it means to live in a more than human regenerative world in 2100. I want to first start by inviting you to hold in your minds and in your hearts someone you really love, someone really young. I'm holding my niece. She's 2 years old throughout this talk. She will be 84 in 2100. And maybe you can think about how it feels after this panel. Okay, so as Christoph said, I'm Anab. I'm co-founder of Superflux and professor of design investigations at the Angewandte just across the road. My talk is called Mother, River, and Holy Sneakers. It'll all become clear in the next less than 20 minutes. So this is an apartment John, my partner, and I built for our son, 4 years old. When he was 4, we imagined that he might live in a home like this when he'd be our age, around 2050 or so. It's actually exactly 10 years ago to this day when we made this apartment, drastically adapted for living with the consequences of climate crisis. At first glance, a seemingly comfortable living space, but then closer inspection, you find that things are really not quite the same. Turning the corner, half of the flat has been given over to food production, oozing purple fog, bubbling spirulina, blooming mycelium, which we built from scratch, fully working food computers using a technique called fogponics, to see the plants growing with nutrient fog in a world where a lot of our stable systems have collapsed. It was an immensely emotional experience stepping inside the space that our son might inhabit as an adult. The future was no longer abstract. It was deeply personal. Over nearly 100,000 people walked through this apartment, and for those people, it became less of an idea and more of a memory. And at no place did we mention climate change or food insecurity or showed any data or graphs or trends. People were invited to make their own connections as we walked through. We posed something to disagree with, to shout over, get angry about. We have a right. We will never really agree about a future, will we? But it became a vantage point to recognize ourselves as participants in complex human and non-human relationships, and to acknowledge that we are all interdependent emotionally, ecologically, and economically. I want to compare that apartment to this line graph. A graph plots a trend line, not the experience of living in it. I was thinking about this because my really good friend lives in New York and her son just turned 1. She also is a 3-year-old, and she sent me this text message a few weeks ago. She was saying, it's really crazy. The world is going on in this way, and I don't know what's going to happen with the war. And we've been living through wars. When I was growing up, I thought I grew up in India, India, Pakistan, India, China, there was a lot of conflict. But I thought, when I'll be grown up, fully adult, there won't be any more wars. But no, in fact, it's become worse. So I was starting to think, what might the home of her children be in 2075? Didn't feel that far off. And it really hit me in my gut, this kind of gut-wrenching feeling of imagining these small children as full-grown adults in this chaotic world. And I wanted to start to reflect, as we do in the work we do around futures, to understand not just the first, but the second, third, fourth, and even fifth order consequences of what happens when you make a decision and the way it circles out. We know this has happened in the choke point of the Strait of Hormuz, but it's going to be really interesting and terrifying to consider the consequences we are going to face and the impact across already pressed costs of living, more disenfranchisement, and so on. So the thing I want us to hold today, whichever scholarship and academic practices or work you come from, is that the small and perhaps even the big decisions we make have consequences. And we are leaving a debt to our future generations. Every short-sighted decision made today creates a debt for future generations. I want to talk a little bit about this because a lot of business in the business world, and especially the tech world, uses this idea of the OODA loop. And even the Pentagon still uses this, which was actually John Boyd's idea of orient, observe, decide, and act. And actually, for those of you who know the OODA loop, orient is actually supposed to be the most important part. But in Silicon Valley and across the world of technology and business, it's act, decide, and act, decide, and act. And the fast movers are the ones who are going to win the game. This is a game. We are in economic warfare with technology. And Pentagon and the US military is still using the OODA loop. AI is amplifying it. And even though things that are happening in the world right now might be very, very deeply thought through, it appears as if it's act first, decide later. And I was thinking about where does this entire OODA loop come from? And I realized this is a very recent sort of language for organizing our world and the operating system and the instruments we use, such as this language of strategy, recruit, tactic, execution, line manager, logistics, disrupt, and it goes on and on. All of this language, they are all coming from a world of military and warring. And the question is, why did we choose to organize most of our recent world around the language of combat, threat, and domination? And it made me think, war thinking produces war-shaped futures. If our future worlds that we are imagining, if the 2100 that we are imagining are built on frameworks that are competitive, adversarial, and optimized for speed and dominance, then we remain combative in our vision of the future. And I think that's fundamentally the systems shift we need. It's a systemic change of heart. We cannot simply think our way out of this predicament. We try to make sense of the future with this one cognitive, cerebral form of intelligence onto which we are pinning our idea of artificial intelligence. And we try to make every important decision from that point, but it's perhaps time to consider other forms of intelligence. A couple of months ago, I went to a Buddhist meditation retreat. It was fantastic. There was a really nice hall, and one of the senior monastics was talking about his teacher who fell very ill and had a coma. And when he got out of his coma, his entire right side was paralyzed. So he was, what do? Whenever they wake up or whenever they want to celebrate, they were drinking tea. He's like, I'm awake, I'm fine now, I want to make tea. So he was using his left hand to try and practice making tea. But it kept, so it was really a very, I would say quite an emotional, visceral feeling. It's a pin drop room of over 200 people felt the sort of spirit of the teacher, as the monastic was saying, he lifted his hand and it just fell down. And as he was explaining, a shrill machinic voice said, "I did not understand that. Can you repeat it?" It was somebody's AI on their phone. And it was kind of trying to make sense of this deep embodied intelligence that cannot be decoded into an instruction. And this is what I want to talk about, that there are other, older, bigger ways of knowing the world. There is kinesthetic, sensory, embodied, relational methods that are also powerful forms of intelligence. Because we think not just with our minds, but with our bodies. And we always have. And that's the work we've been doing in our studio at Superflux for 17 years. We often call it speculative design. It's the practice of making abstract futures tangible and embodied, futures people can experience today. We help businesses, governments, cultural institutions to think about the future from the future. You can think of us as archaeologists of the future, bringing back artifacts you can touch, feel, breathe, and hear and see. And I'm giving you these examples as ways of saying these are all these other forms of intelligence that help people make decisions about our collective futures. So when we took heavily polluted air and invited ministers at the government of UAE to breathe that polluted air, it was brought home the point that no amount of data can. This is not the future you want your children to inherit. The next day, the government announced billions of dollars in renewables. We can't claim that as ours alone, but an embodied encounter with the future turns a justifiable decision into a bold and a brave one. It moves us from a place of political de-risking to authentic action. I think a lot about bold decisions, because if we see 2100, which is the number of the room today, right? Where are we up there? It's kind of scary if we start looking at some of these headlines of where we are headed for 2100. And it reminds me of an essay book, which is really worth reading, by David Graeber, posthumously published, where he writes the idea that the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make, and we could just as easily make different. I mean, I say that lightly, just as easily, but we have gathered here collectively, and we can shape a different story. And I'm bringing my artistic practice here, talking about the work we do, is to create kind of stories, artifacts, experiences, sounds, films that create these visceral encounters with different possible futures. And my partner John and my son, they're both training to do black belt in karate, so we have a lot of martial arts metaphors. How do we redirect attention towards new perspectives and possibilities? We call it perceptual aikido. And that's what I'm here to talk in context of the more than human world. How can we shift our perspectives from the human to the more than human world, which is what is in the subtitle of this panel discussion. This was a field guide we wrote in the context of design, but I imagine for other practices, how do we move from this mindset of fixing to caring? How do we move from this idea of independence to interdependence, because we are all interconnected? And what does this mean in terms of if we continue to think of progress, a certain kind of progress is the only imaginative framework? So building on that manifesto or field guide, we created a certain set of myths or embodied experiences. This was at the Venice Biennale a few years ago, called Refuge for Resurgence, where we set up a dinner table, not just for humans, but also for a fox and a raven and a wolf and a rat and a mushroom, all the folks we consider pests and vermin. Because these are constructs and you can experience them dissolving into what they've always been. And something we did, so in that particular multi-species banquet, it was set as a deconstructed home with a 130-year-old oak tree, and you start to see new worlds. And there's a visceral, sensory, full-bodied experience, because stories is how we've met the world forever and ever. And the other project is Invocation for Hope, which was commissioned by Christoph at the MARC. This is in the Museum of Applied Arts for the Vienna Biennale for Change 2021. And here you see we were interested in collaborating with the forestry and fire departments of Austria's Neukirchen region, salvaging and transporting 400 burnt trees that had been recently destroyed in a wildfire. This is not a forest, it's a monoculture, and when it catches fire, it really burns through because there's no biodiversity. And so we brought these remnants of the wildfire and installed them in the main space of the MARC, inviting people to walk through the remnants of what was a very a very human-centered way of thinking into a multi-species world at the center, and to contemplate our place amongst other species. And for those who are interested in digging deeper into it, we have published in Ecology and Society Journal and written about what is the potential of transformation for creative practices, what are the 9 dimensions to consider. It's a framework to help us also as artists and practitioners measure the impact of our work. Continuing on that thread with the more than human, we are really interested in the space between technology and our ecology. And one of the big questions we are thinking a lot about is currently all our rivers. We've been working with the River Thames for a while now, and it's been considered as a resource, right? A lot of our AI is being powered by rivers. What if we flip that relationship? What if we use technology to serve our more than human world? So we worked with the UK government's policy lab and got the policymakers to understand through the voice of the river the perspective of all its interconnected ecosystem for the decisions they were making around our freshwater systems for 2043 and beyond. And this was what happened. We created a speculative agency called the Ecological Intelligence Agency, where we are trying to bring the ecological intelligence of the river and its ecosystem through the voice of the AI into the room of policymakers. We presented 3 samples of water waste telling a story of a distinct messy pollution like agricultural runoff, industrial waste, microplastics, and heavy metals. So each of these water samples told a different story. When you put this, when the policymaker puts it on the sensor, the AI brings to life the perspectives of all these other stakeholders. And that has had a very powerful effect in different sorts of contexts when they want to understand whose voices are we not listening to in this focus of banking our rivers. And we took this even further. We wanted to bring it out of the policy room into the public domain. And so we've started to ask the question of how can we bridge the gap between the logic of modernity and the ecological wisdom we've relied on for millennia. When I hear a peacock in India, I know it's monsoon and it's going to rain. We all have this knowledge systems about the landscapes, and we are losing this. And the question is, how can we bring that back? So in our studio, we have built 4 intricately handcrafted sculpture objects that sit by the riverside and collect the patterns of the river. We are asking again, what if AI could help us listen to our rivers again? The nature recordings on our sensors that are fully working, we are also starting to capture the folklore, the mythology, the ecological wisdom of different communities who have lived across the Thames for over 300, 400, 500 years and are collecting these stories and building small language models that are trained on this folklore, which is considered maybe not knowledge in the traditional sense of the word, so that we want to bring this ecological wisdom into our AI systems. Rather than humans prompting the AI, the project flips the relationship. The river prompts the AI, which in turn prompts us, inviting us to reattune to the slower ancient cycles. So the river becomes our teacher. Well, it always has been our teacher. It's interesting because the more you start listening to the river, you remember the oldest truth we have, that the river that runs through you runs through me. And this shapes a very different understanding of the future. As my partner John says, the future is old. And Tim Ingold has actually made this really beautiful drawing about how old futures look. When we move beyond this layered way of thinking and start thinking generationally, if we have to think of 2100, we have to think generationally. Then we start thinking of braiding. Instead of looking down from the sky and mapping the world in strata, we are all flowing through it. And that's at the heart of the work that is currently on show, a solo show called The Craftocene by our studio at the Welt Museum in Vienna. And it's in this exhibition at the Welt Museum. We are asking, what kind of ancestors are we becoming? And at the heart of that sits a new work called Relics of Abundance. We are imagining our descendants, all our descendants, far off in the future, trying to understand our current time of material plenty, the goods we worshipped and the activities we engaged in order to resurrect the riches of our time. They are interpreting the stuff we use, our phones, our sneakers, the stuff we obsess over as devotional objects, imbued with magical properties. They think that we have been worshipping a religion called the market. In a dimly lit room in the Welt Museum, these objects are displayed as complete ritual scenes, grouped on plinths, labeled meticulously in the aesthetic language of the museum's ethnography itself. The reason we did this is because we want to cut through the veil of normalcy to be able to see the strangeness of our current time. And yes, this is a deeply artistic project and absurd, and that's pretty much the idea. One of the rituals is a Vasily chair. For designers in the room, you would know and recognize this famous chair, painstakingly handcrafted with a single indigo-dyed cloth, clad in metal, which has been foraged and flattened from beer cans and fizzy drinks cans left over. A young child bound to the chair is made to sit on it and bow into the abyss of an obsidian mirror as a coming-of-age ceremony. And there is a poem next to this as the child is being forced to sit and stare into this device. Let the youth be seated in the place of communion, bowed in attention as childish desires are sacrificed through the consumption of hours. And so on it goes. And finally, one last ritual speaks to the obsolescence as a form of a ritual sacrifice. They found out that this particular civilization was obsessed with sneakers and shoes. So every year they handcraft this box and pour molten lead to make a new one every year as an offering to obsolescence, each weighing 25 kilos. The poems they imagined while making these sneakers, everything that is made must be unmade so that it may be made again anew. For the market hungers for the new and loathes that which remains.
For without the new, there is no growth. And without growth, the glory of the market recedes. And with its recession comes the suffering of man.
At the heart of this work is understanding our place in history and making clearer choices about the futures we want, finding ways to paths forward. I want to leave you with this question. In 2100, how do we want to be remembered? As a generation that manufactured mountains of sneakers and worshipped £100,000 or $1,000 handbags, or as a generation whose collective action brought about a future, a more hopeful one? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hannah. And now it's Matias' turn.
Well, where is the golden clicker? Here. First, I would like to say thank you for the generous invitation to be part of this. This is really a great event. I knew it's going to be hard to follow up, but I'm going to give it a try. So my lecture is called The Strange and the Common. And I would like to start with a little story. Imagine you're walking through a forest. It's winter. There's fresh snow everywhere, and you come across these footprints. A dog. You never see the dog, right? But you came through here, and you recognize in the size, the spacing, and the fresh they are, that a dog passed here not too long ago. You didn't see it happen. You inferred it. From a couple of features in the snow, you put together a whole thing you never actually saw. Inference is also the most honest way. I know how to talk about the future, or maybe like this, I don't know. Now you can agree with that better. Let me show you the deepest footprints I think we're currently leaving behind and how they might, lead into a possible future. For most of history, our tools were outside of us. They sat in our hand like a hammer. And then the camera came up in the 19th century. Suddenly, for the first time, you can make an image without a hand at all. Painters were terrified. They were sure photography is going to put them out of business. You know what's interesting? It never happened. Why? Because painters and artists adapted. Impressionism, expressionism, abstraction, surrealism, none of this would have happened without the shock and the insult of the camera. Because painting had to go places and do the thing the machine couldn't do. So every time a machine takes over something we used to do with our hands, we get pushed into asking, okay, so what's left for us? Photography took the hand. And our machines now, they're reaching for something deeper. Photography was the moment the picture detached from the hand. What we're experiencing right now is the detachment of cognition from the skull. So what is this these machines actually do? The AI model is not a mind. It's doing the thing your eye just did in the snow. Back in 1959, two scientists, Hubel and Wiesel, figured out that the brain doesn't grab a whole scene at once. It picks up edges, contrasts, particular features. It builds the world up on those small pieces. And the neural network does exactly the same thing. It recognizes edges, corners, blobs, stacked up layer by layer. This is the origin of machine vision, and we use the same method in reverse for image generation today. Until there's a facade, or there's a city, right? Or a pink elephant drinking tea in a living room. All of these are, of course, things we can do here. Either way, the model moves through a compressed, high-dimensional map of everything it has seen. That's why we can do all the things before and much, much more. The latent space where similar features cluster. The model interpolates between existing points, settling on positions no single example occupied before. Reading the features, reconstructing the presence of a dog from the prints in the snow, so to speak. That is it. It's not a miracle. It's not black magic. It's not voodoo. It's just a technology. But it is a new kind of technology, one that doesn't just do a task, it changes how we know things. On top of it, I would argue it's a cultural technique, like perspective drawing, like Incan quipu, like musical notation, and many, many more. So where does that leave us humans? For most of the art's history, we put the human at the top of a pyramid. The artist up there at the pinnacle, the genius. The ideas flowing down through the tools into the material, and the tool and the material just obey. I'm pretty convinced that pyramid is currently falling apart. There's this wonderful book by James Bridle called Ways of Being, where he just lays out beautifully all the kinds of intelligences that are already present on this planet. Animals, plants, fungi, whole ecosystems, including machines. So the pyramid kind of collapses into a plateau. And the plateau is crowded. There is us, but there's also fauna, flora, geology, climate, synthetic cognition. We are one kind of intelligence among a lot of others. Now, the comfortable thing to say is, AI is just a tool. It's a fancy pencil, but a pencil doesn't bend. And the thing we're talking about changes every single time you train it. It's the first instrument in history that actually transforms while you use it. So just let me ask this straight. If it can learn, is it still a tool? I don't think so. I think it's a collaborator. It is on the plateau with us, and it adds something we didn't put there ourselves. And this is where I would also be very careful, because the next thing people want to say is, well, if it contributes, then maybe it's conscious. I'm quite suspicious about that. I don't feel comfortable handing consciousness to an AI model. And it's not sentimental, it's just practical. I can't define what consciousness is. The neuroscientists I know can't define what consciousness is. The philosophers probably sitting in this building or even in this very room, no offense, can't define what consciousness is. We don't actually entirely understand how our brain produces consciousness. So for me to stand up here and tell you we've built consciousness out of silicon, that's claiming we made something we can't even describe properly. The machine infers. I don't think it feels. I don't feel it experiences, and it doesn't need to feel or experience in order to contribute. A block of marble contributes to a sculpture, and nobody's asking whether the marble is awake or if it feels pain when struck with a hammer and a chisel. So what is it then? Let me tell you what I think it is for. And that's just my opinion. What I actually do with it is, I think the real gift of this machine for me is the estrangement. Making something familiar strange so that you finally see it. That's the oldest job in art. And inference does it at a scale we've never been able to do before. It goes down into the latent structure of the data and brings back something we could never have reached by intuition alone. Strange but beautiful, alien but useful, novel but familiar. I would argue that it's the first 21st century artistic design method. It opens up territory, produces new form and new knowledge. And that is the work on the plateau. The artist stays as the navigator of that latent space, the one who keeps it strange, who resists the flattening into monoculture, and who makes visible the position that every one of these systems is quietly encoding, because every model also carries a worldview. Our job is to show it the way the doghouse showed it, or the Piranesi gun, the brutal Slettenborg that you see here, making the strange beautiful in public as a cultural argument. But please consider this first. Every single inference I run has a body. It gets paid for in palladium, tantalum, copper, silicon, gold, in rivers of water and thunderstorms of electricity. We're literally tearing open the earth to build the pharmacon we're hoping will help us heal it. Secondly, it has an owner. Every model learns from something, from data, from the residue of millions of lives, scraped, labored, and owned. It can be compared like this. The 19th century industrialized the body. The 21st century is industrializing cognition itself. And right now, a handful of people own the pipelines that turn all our thinking into capital. In this context, labeling is a political act. The dataset decides whose culture counts and whose just disappears. This is the universe I actually work in. People like Marx, Shklovsky, Rossi Braidotti, Brecht, Hart, and Negri, and many, many more have influenced whatever I'm trying to convey to you here today. You can call it a post-human materialist position. The human is one agent among many, made of the same matter as everything else, and the knowledge held in common. So when somebody asks me, is AI good or evil, which happens occasionally, I tell them they actually were asking the wrong question. The machine is agnostic in the most non-positivist way possible. The harm, however, is real and it's human. I don't think our job is to serve the machine or to answer to it, and it's certainly not to serve a small group of people who happen to own the machines. Our job is to decide who owns them, and that, for once, is the one thing we might actually be able to decide. I do this for a living. You can build an AI system where control stays with the people whose culture trained it. Sovereignty is a first-day decision, written into the architecture of the model itself, and you can start it basically any time you want, including tomorrow or in 100 years, but tomorrow would be better. So let me quickly sum this up for you. For me, it comes down to three things. First, machine doesn't think, it infers. It's a new way of knowing, a cultural technique like perspective once was, or musical notation. Second, the harm here is human. It always was, and it sits in who owns all of this. So keep the ground common. Decide to control the systems and decide it immediately. And third, what this thing is good for is estrangement, defamiliarization. You go down into the latent space and you bring something back that's alien but beautiful, strange but familiar enough to move you. And that, for me, is the artistic vision for a modern human world. Because you take that same estrangement and you aim it at the human in itself. Shklovsky made the familiar strange so we would see it again. The underfit model does something he couldn't. It returns the figure before it has resolved, under-resolved, not yet settled into the outline we assume, like a human figure in the fog. In that indeterminacy, we come into view, maybe more clearly than before, we are but one agent among a multitude, made of the same matter as everything else, part of a post-human ecology. The future is an echo. It bounces back from the sound we make now, and the footprints are already in the snow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matias. It's Eva.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph, for the invitation and to the board of the Digital Humanism conference. It's a real pleasure to share the space, or the whole room, the stage with such brilliant minds. And I would actually like to acknowledge the overall title of this conference, Orientation in Turbulent Times. As I think the term describes our present status incredibly well. Turbulence describes conditions in which multiple forces act simultaneously, creating instability, unpredictability, and movement without a single direction. We seem to live in a state of intensifying dynamics, of permanent acceleration that feels turbulent and overwhelming. As a curator working at the intersection of art, technology, science, and society, I have spent the past few years thinking about these turbulences, and that led me to think about the notion of time, about how we understand intelligence, and about how humans relate to the world and to the technologies they create and use. This has become central to my work at CYVA and to the upcoming edition, which opens on November 12th at Belvedere 21, and is titled Post-Acceleration. I understand post-acceleration as a condition in which acceleration has become the default. The pace of our life has steadily intensified. Acceleration is no longer experienced in a sequence of events, but is a turbulent, recurring state that shapes how we perceive, attend, and engage. One technology that has significantly contributed to this condition is, for me, social media. I would even argue that we should talk just as much about what social media feeds are doing to our brains as we do about the possibility that AI might weaken our cognitive capacities. With tools like Instagram or TikTok, or you name it, we have reached a new level of speed when it comes to the consumption of information from all over the world. Countless simultaneous realities competing for our attention. War, AI slope, climate collapse, funny memes, economic crisis, personal messages, political extremism, cat videos. Everything appears in the same feed, in the same second, according to the same logic of attention. The desire to withdraw and stop sometimes feels like the only way to go. No more news, no more doom scrolling, just pause. But this brings me to thinkers like Donna Haraway. The biologist and feminist thinker begins one of her iconic books, Staying with the Trouble, by saying that we live in troubled times, in muddled, in unsettling and disturbing times, and we can add turbulent times. And what I find inspiring in Haraway is that she does not assume that stability can somehow be restored, but rather accepts that there is no stable ground. Everything is in motion. There is no single direction. And yet this does not necessarily mean the end of the world. In the past 2 days, we heard a lot about AI and human intelligence, and I found it quite interesting as one of the statements that intelligence is a measurement. Intelligence can be understood as a technology that emerged with Industrial Revolution. I found this particularly interesting as the concept is clearly directional, right? Like how many points does my IP test count or reach, intelligent or not? And it reminded me of James Bridle's book, Ways of Being, as well, who takes a different stance and follows thinkers like evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis. Ruman Chowdhury in yesterday's panel talked about similar ideas. Intelligence is everywhere. You find it in fungal networks communicating underground, in octopus cognition, in collective insect intelligence, or in ecological forms of distributed problem solving. The point is that different beings are intelligent in radically different ways. Also, quantum scientist and artist Libby Heaney invites us to think of consciousness not as something contained within one individual, but as distributed, tentacular phenomenon that extends across multiple layers of space and time. She even uses the octopus and its tentacles as a recurring metaphor in several of her multimedia artworks. Once we begin to think in this tentacular way, the main question might also no longer be whether AI, for example, is becoming more intelligent than humans. The more interesting question becomes what kinds of links, forms of attention, and ways of being are made possible or impossible through our entanglements with technology like AI. I have found Karen Barat's book, Meeting the Universe Halfway, in the timeline downstairs, and I believe that their concept of intra-action is particularly helpful to understand entanglements. As a theoretical physicist and philosopher, Barat bridges quantum physics, feminist theory, science, and technology studies. The term intra-action tells us that entities do not first exist separately and then interact, rather they emerge through relations. Can't we think of those entities as in ourselves? Aren't we constituted by our relationships with technologies that also shape us, with infrastructures, with other species, with one another? Barat is also interested in the more than human world. Perhaps we should even occasionally remind ourselves that there are about 2 kilograms of bacteria living inside our own bodies. In a sense, we are already more than human. Lynn Margulis would state that we are composite beings. Our bodies are products of ancient collaborations. And I would like to draw a line here to our cyber edition on quantum science and art, which happened last year and resulted into publications that I brought. One of them is the exhibition catalog that came out of the Indeterminate Apparatus exhibition at Belvedere and contains, of course, information about the wonderful artworks that we showed, but for example, also a very brilliantly done glossary by scientist Tanja Traxler that explains quantum phenomena in terms like superposition, entanglement, or the metaphor of Schrödinger's cat, for example. And the other one is Quantum and the Moving Image, which is a collection of conversations that came out of that same exhibition and festival context. I edited this one in collaboration with Cinema O, based in Milano. And yeah, it's conversations with computer and quantum scientists like Ivona Brandic, Patrick Emmons, or Tanja Traxler as well, artists, filmmakers, and musicians like architect Marina Otero and Manuel Correa from the collective Forensic Architecture. The conversations are interlinked throughout the book, and they're designed to be read in a non-linear way. You can move through them in different directions and jump around, and hopefully also discover unexpected connections and entanglements. So we should continuously shape our awareness of global entanglements, which also means that when thinking of technology, we need to be aware of global power structures, exploitation, extraction. We heard that in this conference earlier. One of the main questions is who has control, who builds the systems, which often leads to the question of who has access and who is excluded, who benefits and who does not. Keywords digital divide or also quantum divide. I often enjoy artistic practices very much because they ask exactly those questions and create space for additional forms of attention. And what could have been more beautiful than Anap's presentation, and also what you showed, Matias. Art allows us to be speculative and rehearse possibilities. Science fiction is a great example, often based on hard scientific facts, so that the narration could potentially be true. I would like to finish with one more example from my upcoming exhibition, Post-Acceleration. You will be able to see the work Eclipse Chorus by South African artist Nolan Oswald Dennis that talks about moon time and eclipse cycles. Drawing on their Zulu background, where lunar cycles are central to cultural understandings of time, Nolan shifts our attention away from linear progress towards recurrence. In the work, you learn about the so-called Saros cycle. Roughly every 18 years, 11 days, and whatnot, Sun, Moon, and Earth return to almost the same relative alignment, producing an almost identical eclipse. Yet, because the Earth has rotated, this same cosmic geometry reappears within different historical and political contexts. One eclipse in this cycle was seen as revolution in science, as the Max Planck Gesellschaft writes. On May 29th in 1919, during the eclipse in northern Brazil, astronomers around Arthur Stanley Eddington measured the shift of stars, which showed up in the dark sky right next to the totally eclipsed sun.
Sure.
The result actually did correspond very accurately with what Albert Einstein had predicted less than 4 years before in his general theory of relativity. In August next year, the same eclipse constellation will be visible across East and North Africa. In a multi-layered installation, Nolan tells us about those historical events and makes the measured cyclical movements of the moon visible. What is the key narration, though, is how these recurring celestial constellations become entangled with very earthly histories of science, local and global impacts of colonialism, together with histories of resistance and liberation. The work tells us that the past does not disappear. It continues to act under altered conditions. So ultimately, hearing all those voices, our task may not be to escape turbulence and leave it behind us, but to learn how to inhabit nonlinearity, regeneration cycles, and more than human entanglements over time and space in a productive way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva. I mean, time is moving fast. We are not only looking into crystal ball, it's rather about also approaches, about toolboxes, about philosophical thoughts, and talking about also approaches. I would pass on to Oliver, who will present something he really worked on very hard at Angewandte, but also as a designer. It has to do with education and approaches at university and how to deal with AI and resonance. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I want to thank you, the audience, for joining our panel. And in my short lecture, I would like to talk about a future that cannot be specified. So this panel asks us to imagine a regenerative future. And the text that we were given, Christoph, uses a particular phrase, the future we truly want. And I want to stay on that phrase for a moment because there is an assumption hidden inside of it. And that assumption is that a regenerative future is something we can want our way toward. That with enough imagination and goodwill, we can picture what it looks like and then build it. The word in the title is imagine. And imagination here means having a vision and working toward it. I think there is a risk that this gets it backwards. If we could describe this future in the words we already have, it would not be the deep change this panel is asking for. It would be a better version of what we already do. Smarter infrastructure, cleaner energy, less waste, good things. But the panel draws a line between regeneration and sustainability. Sustainability manages the damage, and regeneration means taking part in processes that were running long before us humans arrived, not steering them more wisely, but learning to live inside something we do not control. A future that is a real break from how we think now cannot be fully described in how we think now. And this is where I let AI enter the room, and this is also usually where the conversation goes wrong. Allow me to explain. The kind of AI everyone is building right now, the AI getting the money, the headlines, the users, I will call it compliance AI. You give it an instruction, it carries it out. We judge it by one thing. How well did it do what I asked? Every product on the market competes on that single question, and it works. Of course it works. People have things they need done, and a machine that does them faster and cheaper is useful immediately. But what it gives us is relief. We wanted something, now it's done. But I want to invite you to look at what that machine cannot do. It picks its answers to match what we asked for, so it is constrained by what we already know how to ask. Now you might say that is not true. I learn from it all the time, and you do. But everything it hands you is something you perceive as right the moment you see it. It can even surprise you when you ask it to surprise you, but only inside the range of things you would accept on sight. Everything it gives you has to pass one test. Does this look right to you? And that test cannot tell the difference between an idea that is wrong and an idea that is right but does not look right yet. Both get thrown out. And some of what a regenerative future would ask of us might not arrive looking right. It might look wrong or confused. It might look beside the point because it does not fit the frame we're using to judge it. This is not a problem with a specific bias or ethics. It is simpler and also harder than that. It is how the machine is built. The filter is doing exactly what it was made to do. It aims to keep out anything we did not already know to want. But it goes deeper than the machine, though. Think about what feeds it. Every day, millions of people bring their most uncertain, unfinished thinking to these systems, their creative blocks, their doubts, the questions they do not ask anyone else. It is probably the largest record of honest human reflection ever gathered. Exactly the kind of thinking I believe a regenerative future would need to draw. And it is collected at scale to train the machine to comply more smoothly. The same move this panel sees in how we treat the living world. Take something living, turn it into raw material, and turn the material into efficient output. And this builds its own momentum. The money compliance AI makes pays for the next better round of it, which pulls in more people who give it more of their thinking, which trains the next round. And each turn cuts the groove a little deeper. The longer it runs, the harder it gets to climb out and head somewhere else. Now compare that against what more than human means in this room. This event means it in the ecological sense, other species, the planet, the whole web of life that runs past anything we decide. In that sense, more than human means yielding to something we did not author, reading what a system is telling us when its logic is not ours. The farmer reads the soil, the designer reads the site. It is a relationship of listening and answering, not ordering and obeying. But AI, the way we are building it, points the other way. It stretches our reach further than our own hands go. It carries out our intentions across distances and timescales we could never cover alone. It makes our will arguably bigger, but it adds nothing from outside our will. there's a slower effect too, and it matters most for 2100. Every time you use one of these systems, it is a tiny training session, not for the machine, for you. If the message you get back thousands of times a year for decades is that not knowing gets cleared up fast and clean, then the muscle that lets you sit inside not knowing weakens. The ability to hold two unsettled answers at once without rushing to pick one. No one means for this to happen, but the training that shapes the machine ends up shaping the person. And the people who will be alive in 2100 are getting that training right now. We keep asking whether the machines will be capable enough for the future. The better question is whether we will be, whether we will still be able to think the way regeneration needs. And that depends on what kind of machine we spend the next 75 years with. So allow me to briefly tell you what I'm working on. One question drives my work, and it is easy to say and hard to answer. Can AI take part in human creativity? And underneath it, a bigger one, can AI be creative at all? Those questions matter here, I believe, because of what creativity actually is. If a regenerative future needs a way of thinking we do not yet have, which is a break at the level of category, not detail, then it needs creativity. Not creativity the way advertising uses it, where an AI designs a logo. Creativity in the real sense, something that rearranges how the person who meets it thinks, something you could not have asked for, because before you met it, you did not have the words to ask. And there is something about creativity we often get wrong. The work comes first, and the understanding comes after. A painter does not know what the painting means and then paints it. A scientist does not have the insight and then go find it. The thing appears on the canvas in the data, and you see something in it you did not put there and could not have predicted. The creative moment is not the making, it is the recognizing. And that changes the AI question completely. A machine can make things. A machine can also sort them and rank them against some standard. But there's a third action, and it is the one that counts. Being changed by what you meet. Making and sorting both happen inside a frame that stays put. Recognizing is the frame itself moving. You see a possibility that was not in your frame a second ago. And as far as anything we know how to build, a machine does not do that. It makes and it sorts. So, can AI be creative in that sense? No. The recognizing is ours. Can AI take part in our creativity? Yes, if we build it for that. And notice what this means for the answer you always hear, the one that says, just wait for the smarter model. A more capable machine is better at making and at sorting, making and better at sorting, the two things it already does. More power does not turn either of those into recognition. The capability is not the question, and it never was. And this is where compliance AI fails on its own terms. A machine that picks its output to match what you asked is a machine built to prevent the one thing creativity runs on, the encounter. It guarantees the answer fits what you expected. It removes surprise at the level of category, which is the place creativity happens. So a machine built for compliance is, whether we meant it that way or not, a machine built against creativity. It can give you small surprises, a different image, a different phrase, a fresh mix of things you already know. it cannot give you the kind of surprise that rearranges how you think, because you would have had to ask for it, and you cannot ask for what you do not yet have the words to name. A machine truly built for creativity would run the other way. It would make something you did not ask for and could not have specified, judged by standards you did not set. And it would hand it to you not as an answer, not as advice, but as something you have to respond to, something you cannot prepare for. Your job would not be to command it. It would be to read it, to find the possibility in what it made, and follow that possibility with your own judgment at your own risk. The first AI system I built does a version of this, and I call it the resonance ring. It is a tool for designers, and it does not answer. It asks. A designer brings their work, and it pushes on the assumptions they did not know they were making. It never scores, it never ranks, and never tells them how to fix it. I built it, not alone, with the support of a brilliant developer, Andreas Schadauer, who is in the room with me now. But my students have not tested it yet. That starts beginning October. What I can tell you is what building it taught me, which no amount of theory showed me. Getting these models to hold a question open instead of rushing to settle it is hard. They lean constantly toward the tidy answer, and you have to push against their training the whole way. And even when it works, the questions can surprise, but never leave the model's own range. That range is the ceiling, and you only feel it when you try to build past it. So how do you get past it? Not by making the model more capable. A stronger model is only better at staying inside the range it already has. The one place a model steps outside that range is where it breaks. The moment it gets things wrong. That is the idea behind my second line of work, speculative and on paper for now. It turns the compliance logic inside out. Output generation happens with no idea what you asked for, so your expectations cannot steer it. Selection happens in a separate layer. And the sharpest version of this family of speculative AI architecture treats the machine's mistakes as the raw material so that the waste becomes the resource. This architecture runs small, deliberately limited, stupid models that get things wrong over the same input. And when several different models get something wrong in the same way, that sameness might be pointing at something real in the material, something a correct reading walks straight past. Or it might just mean they all share the same blind spot. I do not know which yet, and that is the open questions these systems want to test. But the question under all of it is not speculative at all. It is this panel's question, in other words. Can we build machines that feed the human moment of recognition, the moment of meeting something you did not expect and being changed by it? Because that moment is what creativity is. And it is what a regenerative future asks of us. Because a regenerative future, if the word means anything beyond just a slogan, is a surprise at the level of category. It asks us to meet ways of living with this planet that we do not have words for yet. A machine that can only give us what we asked for is the wrong machine for finding what we did not know we needed. And if we let our machines train us, one conversation at a time, to expect answers instead of encounters, we lose the very thing a regenerative future depends on, which is the ability to be changed by what we cannot yet name. That ability is ours, not the machines, and it is ours to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, also for a very stimulating talk here. I can assure you, regeneration is not a slogan.
I know you took that as a personal attack.
Worked very hard on that, and I would even go as far as saying that the answer to orientation in our turbulent times is regeneration. But of course, we have to make much more of it than a slogan, and resonance will have to play a huge role. And when we talk about regeneration, Joanna and we are totally obsessed with the regenerative AI, and I hope in your talk you will tell us a little bit about that. I'm looking at the clock now, so we have 10
I'll
12
keep it
minutes.
short.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So to start preparing for this panel, I actually did something quite shameful, Oliver, you would say, because I typed into a ChatGPT, what does a regenerative modern future look like? And I did that to provoke myself, because I know that these images of the future are quite all the same. They look all similar. So, glass towers covered with plants, smooth autonomous vehicles move silently through clean streets, drones fly above carefully designed landscapes. Nature decorates every piece of human infrastructure. This future is fast, but quiet and frictionless. There's no pollution, no conflict, no labor, no waste. There is also no mining territories, no war, no displaced communities, no broken ecosystems, no histories of extraction. All the mess has disappeared from view. So these images, these imaginaries are not innocent. Futures are political. They center some bodies, knowledges, histories, and forms of life. They also exclude and silence others. So the real questions I should have asked AI, but potentially I cannot really, is who is this future for? What forms of life and knowledges are centered in this process? What and who makes this future possible? And how this future, in turn, makes humans and non-humans. So this is where design becomes crucial. Design has always been involved in future making. It shapes practices and bodies, but also materializes our imaginaries and creates worlds. Design also makes humans. It defines what being human means. So for example, from my research on on the design of conversational agents and chatbots, I know that they listen to certain voices better than others. They understand certain questions better than others. And in that process, they silence voices, they silence perspectives of humans and non-humans. So what are the futures that AI design is producing? Unfortunately, even when designers use their creativity to imagine more sustainable and inclusive futures, those reproduce actually the very logics that brought us into this ecological crisis in the first place. So these futures that human-centered AI is imagining are anthropocentric, and they actually center white, male, able bodies and see humans as masters of nature instead of as part of ecosystems. Human-centered design has been the prevalent approach for more than a decade, and designers have tried to solve today's challenges by focusing on human needs and values, and I guess that is something we share with the humanities as well. But in doing so, design has often failed to account for how these solutions decenter the needs of many humans and other species. And I think that shifting from a human-centered approach to a more than human one is urgent in the era of AI. Because AI systems are not only affecting humans, they depend on the extraction of planetary resources that affect actually more than human communities. I have plenty of examples of this where I come from, South America. In Argentina, where I was born, indigenous communities have lost access to their ancestral territories to favor lithium extraction. This is a mineral that is essential, critical, as I call it, for batteries, but also for AI infrastructure.
The extraction of this mineral is also affecting the land, which is the habitat of many species we depend on for our own survival. So I think that in the era of AI, the digital humanities might need to attend to the material conditions of the digital, and this has been said in the last days. The infrastructures, the data centers, the mining, the labor, the planetary cost. This is a key discussion in the critical post-humanities. The critical post-humanities converges two critiques. On the one hand, it critiques anthropocentrism, the idea that humans are separate from and superior to the rest of the living world. And on the other hand, it critiques how the human has been constructed through colonial and oppressive systems of power. Important to note that critical posthumanism is not transhumanism. It is not about enhancing human capabilities through technology, but it's very different from that. It's a feminist approach that understands humans in relation to other agencies and intelligences. So it is an invitation for the humanities, as at least how I understand it, an invitation to the humanities to confront human exceptionalism and rethink the human as relational, embodied, embedded, and dependent on more than human words. So my wish for a regenerative future in 2100 would probably look less like everything is green and more like everything is alive, entangled, contested, repaired, and negotiated. And maybe I should say something about regeneration, because I wasn't sure if the other panelists were going to address it. But so to me, regeneration is an approach that goes beyond traditional notions of sustainability, recognizing that less harm is not enough. It invites us to restore biodiversity, engage with indigenous knowledge systems, and cultivate non-extractivist relationships with land, materials, humans, and other species. It's about both ecological and cultural regeneration. It aims to restore not only life in ecosystems that have been disrupted, but also the connection with local knowledge systems that have been lost, erased, or marginalized. So a digital humanism, a regenerative digital humanism in 2100 would need to take multi-species survival seriously and move away from anthropocentrism. It should not be a future where wealthy cities become greener while extraction is displaced elsewhere. It should not be a future where AI helps optimize sustainability only for some humans. Instead, it should be a future where we have collectively composted our fantasies of control with all the living and non-living beings around us, and learn how to become better participants in the ecosystems we are part of, like Rosie Berdotti says, to become worth it of our times. And we don't need to do that not just in theory, but also in practice, together with artists, designers, activists, ecologists, policymakers, among others, that will be integral to this research program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. We're going to drop our little experiment because we don't have the time. We have time for one or two questions. And please also say how you are addressing the question too. Just two questions, because I've only a couple of minutes. You say, Mike?
I think this question goes to Anna because you had such an evocative presentation, so thank you for that. But you started us out by asking us to hold someone dear to us. I was holding my niece through your presentation, thinking about what would I say to her in a letter that she opens a few decades from now. What would we say about the responsibilities we let go of, the debt we created for them, just as you prompted us to do? And I guess my question is exactly that should we give up on the millennium we're in right now and think that basically the next generation has to find the solutions, and they are already doing that? Or do we have some very practical things we can do today, whether in education, whether in actually changing structural systems to prepare them for this new place of regenerative future? How would you help us think about that?
Thank you. A question I'm wrangling a lot. I think I think one of the things, and I was listening to Indy Joe, who's a friend of mine, talk last week, is that of human labor, as we understand it in this context, that if we think about us being, what does it mean to be human, as other panelists have raised, is seen as an entity or a unit of productive unit of labor. Automation means that humans are a surplus. So I think one of the practical things is to consider where we want to situate automation and what does it mean to be human? What are the practical conditions in education, yes, in how we understand the idea of human purpose rather than productivity. What are the things we value? What does value even mean? I think these are some things that we must consider in a broad sense, but in a very, very practical way. I would say to hold the idea of the broader world and your personal world not separate. So sometimes I think about things that are valuable to me, and none of them are actually monetarily valuable at all. So these days I think a lot about things that I want to pass on, and it is a scarf or a small piece of or a pen or things like that. And I think to consider that redefinition of value.
Thank you, Anab. Is there another question? No? Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll sum up. Thank you very much to the panelists. I have to say just a few things. There's a lot to discuss, and I hope you kind of collected also these thoughts that were presented earlier on, because it's a large time span, 75, 74 years and beyond, I have to say. So we will see when you come up with concrete concepts about Regen AI rather than Gen AI, okay? And I also have to say that coming back to regeneration, the beautiful thing is the orthodox definition of regeneration is putting life at the center of everything. And not only human life, but also the life of other species, plants, and so on. And this, I think, is a beautiful kind of concept also when dealing with the digital future, putting life at the center of everything. And I will end on a confession. Recently, I irritated somebody very much when I said, I'm not only an eco-feminist, I'm really an eco-feminist. Everybody who knows me will testify to that. I also said I'm a digital feminist. And suddenly I got kind of irritation. What is a digital feminist? One of my allies in this regard is here, Eva, because when I was at the Foreign Ministry, the last exhibition I commissioned was actually on female AI. And this is, amongst others, was a digital feminist does. So we have to think about also the capabilities that are more associated with the female sex rather than the male sex. And it's fascinating that we need other capacities, qualities in AI than we usually have. So this is also something we have to think about the future. This idea of we all have to become not only eco-feminists, but also digital feminists. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to the wonderful panelists here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to the audience.
Very good.